Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacalyn. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacalyn at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome, friends, to USA Global TV and to our friends listening on Business Talk Radio. I am Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is the United Kitchens. Joining me on our stage each week is the lovely and talented celebrity chef, Ricki McKenna, who is also a certified nutritionist, and she says she's a foodie. Let's find out more. Hi, Ricki. How are you?
Oh, I'm just wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn. I just realized that I'm missing an ingredient today, but I'll show you how to take care of that if that happens to you when you're cooking.
I love it. Real practical tips. What actually goes on when we're filming, we've got to just go with the flow. So
absolutely.
Ricki, I'm going to spotlight you, and I just shared with our audience just a very small tidbit about your background. So for people just joining us for the first time, why is food so important, nutrition so important? And you've made this sort of your life's mission. You've got, you're an author now, and you've got a lot of new things coming out. Let's hear more.
Okay. Well, I am a certified nutritionist. Thank you very much for the last 22 years. So I've learned about the value of food. And basically what I've learned is that without food, you die. Other than something as simplistic as that, food is the key, the basis for your health and for living well, not just living. As a nutritionist for 20-something years, I've watched people and helped people as their coach and as their nutritionist understand, and this is my mission in life, my passion, what food is, what it does for your body, and why you should eat in a certain way, not particularly a diet. A diet refers to anything you put in your mouth, actually. But what I've found, Dr. Jacalyn, is that the difference between eating well for your particular system can mean living with joy, living healthfully, versus chronic problems that may creep up, like diabetes or any stomach problems, digestive problems. If you're eating properly for your particular system, it makes a huge difference in how you feel, how you perform, mentally, emotionally, as well as physically. So that's why I'm so passionate about food. And yes, I do eat cookies, and I love cake occasionally, but I really prefer good breads, things like that. And I've worked in Colorado. I had a soup business, an organic soup business for several years, where I manufactured 12 different soups and sold them in Aspen, Colorado, in a deli, and through the whole Roaring Fork Valley in Colorado, at farmers markets and so forth. So I provided food for thought as well as the actual food for your system to intake for your body. And that's where I think that if we understand how important this room is, the kitchen, this is Ricki's kitchen, in your house, because where does everybody gather when you have a party? Plunk, in the kitchen. And they follow the good smells that come from the kitchen, aromas. And so my philosophy has been, make it great, do it easily, do it simply, use the best ingredients, and enjoy your life from the position of being healthy from what you intake as food.
Wow, Ricki, I'm always learning something new about you. I didn't know about that business that you have. We're going to have to get you on the Business Talk Show so you can share with our business viewers about how to start a business and what that was like.
It was chaos at first, but it worked. As you well know, when you start a business, you start learning a whole different world. And
Yes, you do. And I like to say that a lot of it is not what we learn in school.
bingo. Absolutely. This is true. I think things are changing though, because I think people are understanding that a lot more of us, especially through the pandemic, might have created something different at home. And so that's actually how I got started with the cooking shows on Zoom and now on USA Global TV. Thank you very much. I feel very blessed to be here and hope that I can impart a little bit of wisdom and a lot of good food to our audience.
Well, you always do every week. Thank you, Ricki. And I want our audience to know that we will be updating all of the social media posts with the recipes each week. So what do you got cooking today, Ricki?
Okay, what we've got, gotta have a fork. Cooking today is a very simple chicken cabbage soup, which involves obviously chicken and cabbage and several other vegetables. So we start with the chicken breast, which has been cleaned. And it's very interesting in this recipe. When I first read the recipe, and of course I do a little of my own creativity with recipes. That's one of the things I do is intuitive cooking. We're taking the chicken breast and we're going to cut it up into bite-sized pieces for several reasons. One of which is that it will cook faster in the pot because we're going to put it in a big old soup pot. And the other is that it makes for great soup when you cut it up because it releases the juices from the chicken. And so I'm going to cut this into bite-sized pieces. As you can see, I slid it first the long way on the chicken breast. And that's important because it helps you to cut more efficiently and quickly into the bite-sized pieces. There are other ways to do it, but whatever you find the best way for you is, go ahead and do it. And so we're cutting up into bite-sized pieces. And then what we're going to do is take this wonderful chicken breast and put it in a big soup pot. It's probably a 6-quart pot. And I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon or so. And one of the things I do on top of my wooden block, which I usually cut vegetables, I have another silicone chopping block because I don't want to get raw chicken into the wood. So if you have a wooden block with something like raw chicken and other raw meat, but particularly chicken, I don't know why, somehow or other it just makes sense to do this because it keeps things cleaner. So I'm going to take my chicken. I've put my olive oil in the pot and we'll move over there if we can make this work. Yahoo! This is an experiment. Ta-da! Okay, so I've got my pot turned on to medium-high with the olive oil in it, and I'm going to scoop my chicken in. Now, you can use other pieces of chicken, but this one calls for chicken breast, and frankly, it's a lot easier and faster than using something like a whole piece of a whole thigh or breasts or excuse me, thighs or any other pieces that have bones, because once you're finished with it, then you don't have to start taking out the bones. So let's go back. We're having fun with the cameras today. Oops. Okay. You'll have to excuse me if it gets a little delayed in between, but I'm still learning how to use that. So, in addition to, of course, the chicken and the chicken soup, we're going to put some garlic. So, it calls for 1 clove or 2 cloves of garlic, and we happen to like garlic, so I'm going to use 3. And if that's something that you like in your soup or any other recipe, when you're using garlic and you want a little bit more, go ahead and use a little bit more, because the recipes become more of your creativity once you put in the things that you really love. So we're going to take the garlic and very carefully with the back of my knife on the wood, so we don't get any pieces of wood, and put that in with the chicken and the olive oil. And we'll start to hear it sizzle in a minute. Here we go. Every little piece counts. And now, something I want to show you about onions. This calls for a small white onion, and I have cleaned it, and I've left where the roots are. That's the side I'm going to hold on to, because if you're like me, when you cut up onions, you start to lose all your makeup. You start to cry. So what I'm going to do is cut the onion in half down to the point where it hits that root, and then start slicing from this end. I might chop it a little bit more because I like it kind of a little bit smaller, like bite-sized pieces. But I'm going to chop it from the end that is not the root. And I swear it makes a huge difference in the crying factor. So here we have onion. I'm going to chop it up just a little bit more. So we've got our chicken in there and our garlic. Then I'm going to take my onion. It's starting to sizzle. Let's give it a little stir in the pot. There we go. So we get the garlic and the chicken touching the bottom of the pot. And I'm going to turn it down just a little bit more so I'm really at medium to medium high. Plunk. Okay. Now I've got my onion, which I'm going to put in. Carefully. Well, let's just grab it. Because the first thing you do when you get in the kitchen is wash your hands, because you know you're going to be handling food. And don't laugh, but that's an important part that people sometimes forget, especially if they're in a hurry. And this is a recipe that if you come home, when you come home from work and you want to cook up some chicken soup in a hurry, let's say within 45 minutes, this is a recipe you can use. There's an alternative way to do it too, and I'll tell you about that in a little while. It also calls, how can you have chicken soup without celery? So we're going to chop up some celery into little bite-sized pieces. And by the way, this soup comes out, it's almost a thick chicken soup, which is great for these times when it's cold outside. And I'm in Houston, and we actually have 40-something degree weather, which is making everybody in Houston go, woo, and take out their winter coats if they have them. So we've got,
Ricki,
yes?
what are some of the nutritional aspects of the soup that we should know about?
Well, first of all, the chicken has your chicken breast has your protein. I think the protein count for chicken breast on average is about 7 to 8 grams of protein. So that's good. Every vegetable has a little bit of protein, and of course, celery has quite a bit of water. It's actually a diuretic, and it's got some other minerals. Any of your vegetables that come from the earth will have minerals and vitamins. So we're going to use the celery. I'm going to put that in. And in this soup, the last time I made it, I had no celery, but I had some fennel. And of course, fennel stalks, which most people throw away. I cut up the fennel stalks and put them in the soup. And it was absolutely delicious. So there's one substitute you can use if you don't have celery and you happen to have fennel. Not everybody has fennel around either, but if you do, that's one good thing you can do with it. I happen to love carrots in my chicken soup. So we're going to cut up one of these. And carrots, of course, have vitamin A. And if you cut a carrot, we'll do it. I'm going to do the other camera because you can see a close-up of this. I want you to see something. Okay, I'm going to hold this up close to the camera. Does that look like an eye?
Yes, it does.
Yes. Carrots are what are known, they're one of what's known as signature foods. And signature foods have relationships with our bodies. So that if you hear somebody say, you should eat carrots because they're good for your eyes, interestingly enough, the actual, it looks like an eye. Carrots have tons of vitamin A, and they will help your eyes. And so even though they are sugary, they're a great vegetable to put in. And of course, they add color as well. So you notice I'm throwing everything in the pot together now. And the next thing that we're going to put in is a little bit of basil. Because we need our seasonings, of course. About 1.5 teaspoons of basil. And I did use one good-sized chicken breast. It was close to a pound.
That's a nice size, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was a healthy chicken. So now we've got basil and oregano. And of course, if there's something else that you want to use, one of my favorite seasonings in chicken soup is sage. So I'm going to take a wee bit of organic sage. When I'm looking for, there it is. I'm looking for the sage that I actually put into a jar. Here's my little jar. And I took my sage leaves from the garden and I let them dry. So I'm going to crumble up some sage leaves. I'll show you what I'm doing. If this gets too crazy, let me know.
All right, I will.
Okay, here we go. And I'll tell you the secret to this soup. Right now, there's nothing in here except a wee bit of olive oil. There's no liquid other than what the vegetables and the chicken itself is producing. You can see how pretty it is. And now I'm going to take my sage, the leaves that are dried, and I'm crumbling it. And sage, to me, is one of the greatest flavors to put into chicken soup. And I did have about 1 tablespoon of the dried sage. So we're going to mix that in with the oregano and basil. So
I love sage also.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's one of those spices that people don't often use, or herbs, I should say. There we go. That's pretty. Now, I do have it up on medium high, so now I'm going to add chicken bone broth. We'll go back here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm using bone broth.
Yeah, I know you shared on a previous show. What is the difference between bone broth, chicken broth, beef broth?
Okay. Bone broth is actually made using the bones. And if you have a pressure cooker, that's a great way to create your own bone broth because you collect all the bones from all the chickens. I keep them in the freezer, packed up in airtight packages. Chicken bones, beef bones, lamb bones, whatever. But chicken bones in particular, I'll put in my pressure cooker cover them with water and add some vegetables, and your spices and everything, because this one has this is a good one that I found, and it has bones, and it actually says made from bones. Carrots, onions, and celery, and sea salt and spices, and pepper, bay leaf, thyme, etc. And it's all organic. So that's one of the things I love about it. The difference between bone broth and just chicken broth is made using the bones and the chicken, but the bones are removed from the broth before it's put through a strainer and the broth is created. With bone broth, and especially if you use a pressure cooker, you have to do them in your crock pot for like 8 hours or more. The bones are actually to the point where you can crush them so that you get the marrow and you get all the nutrients that are in the marrow, which of course helps your blood. It helps in blood building. So the bone broth is quite a bit more healthful for most people than just plain old broth.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's really an important point to understand. And it's also, if I could get the darn thing open, everything would be fine. There we go. All right, and we need about 3 cups of it. So I have my 2-cup measuring cup, and I can hear it beginning to sizzle. So I got my 2 cups. And I'm going to turn it back up to high when I put the broth in, and you'll probably hear it. No, you won't. But
yes,
you'll
I do hear it.
Yeah, it stopped the sizzle. And the point I would like to make here as far as cooking, when I use water, I will heat the water before I put it in. If I use just plain water to make soup or something else in a recipe that's a cold fluid, when you put the cold fluid in, it stops the heating process, the cooking process. So if you want to, you can take the broth, and heat it up a little bit before, so that when you put it into the pot, it's already warmed and it doesn't slow down the cooking process. The point here is this is a quick recipe, and I should have done that, but we're doing it this way this time. So we've got 3 cups of broth and a whole bunch of vegetables. And now let's get over here. This also calls for zucchini. However, as I said earlier, I used the zucchini last night. So what I had in the refrigerator was broccoli. And of course, it's a little different flavor and consistency from the zucchini, but it's an excellent vegetable. And since you don't want to really overcook broccoli in any case, what I'm doing is chopping it up into bite-sized pieces, because it calls for about half a cup of zucchini. Let's see, yeah. So rather than the zucchini, I'm putting in broccoli. And let's see if this is I'm going to bring this back to a boil. Now we have our liquid. And let's see, so we've been about 20 minutes working with this. And then I will get my cabbage out and show you what to do with that. So I'm going to take the broccoli. I'm going to put it in now just for cooking's sake so we can make it work quickly. And just sit it on top and let it integrate itself. And scrape with the back of your knife when you're on wood so that you don't get wood splinters into your food. And just give that a little help into the pot. Because I did the broth cool or room temperature, it's taking a while to come back up to boil, but it will. And now, for the rest of the soup, this calls for half a head of cabbage. And it also calls, I'm going to use about a third of this head. And the very funny thing happened yesterday. The other time that I made the soup, my fiance happens to love cabbage, and he decided to make a cabbage salad for us the other night. And so rather than having the whole half a cabbage left, I had about this much, the third of the cabbage, excuse me. And actually that was plenty in the soup, so that's what we're going to use. And I'm not going to chop it, I'm just going to slice it.
I love how helpful Richard is.
Yes, he definitely is helpful. But it was, oh, you used the cabbage. And if anybody goes through that, if somebody has favorites and you have it in the refrigerator and they go after it, this is how you get around it, like the zucchini and this. So I'm going to chop the bigger pieces in half so that we have really nice slices of cabbage to put in. And I'm not going to put the cabbage in yet because I want to bring it up to a boil first, because you don't want to overcook the cabbage. And here we go. It's starting to really smell yummy. Let me see if I can. I need a partner in here to do this.
Oh, Richard.
He's known fondly as the hand on my other show because usually he'll come in and all you see is this going after the food. So we're beginning to boil. Yummy. And now's the time to put in a little good old salt and pepper. So I have my kosher salt. I'm taking about half a teaspoon because the broth is a low sodium broth and you want a little bit more salt. And again, salt is something that someone else can add as they eat it. And I'm going to use my fresh pepper. So far, as far as seasonings, we've used salt and pepper, oregano, basil, and sage. And here we go. You can see it start to bubble. Isn't that pretty?
It's beautiful.
And oh my, Yum. Now what I'm going to do is cover it, turn it down a little bit so that it continues to be on a low boil, and let it do its thing for a few more minutes and see what kind of questions we have. Anybody have any questions from our audience?
Anybody out there have questions? We'd love to answer them for you.
Yeah, we would. And you know, you can use whatever vegetables you like. As I said, if you have a preference for zucchini rather than broccoli, and of course, each one that you put in will have a little different flavor influence on the soup. So remember that. And of course, the sage, originally this recipe didn't have sage. It had only the oregano and the basil. And so I decided that I happen to love sage. And then there's another little secret ingredient that can be used. It's something that I learned from a sweetheart friend of mine from Mexico who does a lot of cooking. And she adds lime juice to the chicken soup. And if you want to have a super taste experience, try sprinkling in a little bit of lime juice after it's served, or you can put it in the pot, depending on if everybody in your family or whomever is going to eat it likes. But try serving it with a little bit of fresh lime juice.
Ricki, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Some people over the years have shared that if you can put the entire chicken into a pot of water and then start chicken soup that way. What are the pros and cons of that method?
It's absolutely wonderful. Of course, you cut it up first. And if you have a pot that's big enough to do that, that's great. And you'd need a pot that's a bit bigger than this one. You'd probably need about an 8-quart pot or more, or a big Dutch oven. Cut the chicken up, make sure you clean the insides as well as the outsides. Cut it up into the big pieces. And the advantage to doing that is that you're cooking with the bones. And of course, you'll get the draw from the bones, and use the skin. Do not skin it. Now, these were skinless breasts, but the skin contains collagen, especially from the moving parts like the arms, wings, and legs and thighs on the chicken, and even the neck. Now, with the neck, I would suggest putting that in a little, if you have a little bag that you could put in that cooks. I've forgotten what they're called, but they're like little nets that you put something in so the bones don't scatter all over the place. And the other disadvantage, if you would be to take the chicken when it's done, and I would definitely let that simmer for at least an hour to 2 hours or even more, so that all the flavors infuse and you get the benefit of the collagen and everything else that's in there from the bones. And then you have to take everything out and remove the bones. And if you've ever done that, there are lots of little bitty rib bones as well as the neck bones. That's the only disadvantage I can see.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot more work.
It is a lot more work, but it can be well worth it because you're getting all the advantages, I say, of the using the bones and the collagen and everything. And sometimes when I do that, the bones are still soft enough to really squeeze them and get some of the marrow into the soup. And if anybody in your family goes, ew, don't tell them, just do it. It adds flavor, and what you're getting is the blood concentration and the red blood cells that actually help build yours. That's why, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but my grandmother used to say, this is penicillin. It's Jewish penicillin.
Absolutely.
And chicken soup has been called Jewish penicillin. Now, here's another way to make this soup if you have time. If you're going to do something, you can do this the night before or do it in the morning before you leave for work, and put all of these things in a crock pot or a slow cooker. And the suggestion is to slow cook. First of all, you take your olive oil and put it in the bottom of the slow cooker inside the cooking part. And then put your chicken in first and turn it up to high. And then you ease in all the other ingredients except for the cabbage. Because as I said earlier, you don't want to overcook the cabbage. So the advantage of doing that is you can turn it on and leave it. You could do it at night before you go to sleep, before you clean up your kitchen. And then after the 2 hours, you can put the cabbage in and let it cook either overnight. Preferably, you can turn it off in another 2 hours. So you might want to start it earlier or start it in the morning and have it done before lunchtime, say. So it's an interesting recipe, but we're speeding it up here for purposes not only of the show, but to show you that you can take a slow cooker recipe and actually speed it up. The concerns are making sure your chicken is cooked fully, thoroughly through, which of course it will be, and also just the advantage of having it within like 45 minutes. And so far we've got about 35. And so I'm letting this it's simmering nicely. I'm going to give it a little stir because that's just what I'm going to do. Oh, yum. Now, if you like your soup a little soupier, you can add a little bit more of the broth. You could even put another cup in. This called for 3 cups, and that's what I put in. It's going to be thick, which I happen to love. And I'll show you what the finished product looks like. I think I'll do it over here. Okay, there's got to be a magical way to do this, Dr. Jacalyn. So
Richard.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, here's our finished product. As you can see, it's thick with the vegetables, and it's dark because of all the vegetables and all the herbs and the seasonings that are in it. So I'll just put that.
Beautiful.
Oh, it's yum. And the only thing that we had to add a little bit was a teeny bit of salt. And yet I like my things a little saltier than Richard does. So I just added a little pinch of salt, and away we went for dinner. And we added, I have some beer bread that a friend kindly brought over that she baked. So we cut a slice of the beer bread, warmed it up a bit, and then put a little butter on it. And we ate that, or you can make a salad to go with it. Like I said, say a green salad or sliced tomatoes or, whatever your preference is. So.
The question I have, Ricki, is, let me come back. So in cooking soup, sometimes, like especially with chicken soup, people will add noodles. And then what happens is the noodles start to grow and they become like enormous. So what do you do if you want to have some type of pasta in your soup?
Well, that's one way to do it. I would suggest adding more water or liquid of some form because this is a pretty thick soup without the noodles. And noodles will expand, but they'll also, if they're wheat noodles or, egg noodles or something like that, they'll add starch to the whole thing, which is a good thing for energy. So that's okay. Or you can take another pot, cook your noodles first, drain them when they're finished, but let them be al dente, harder, not fully cooked noodles, and then add them to the soup in the last 4 minutes or so of your heating it up. So you can cook the noodles separately, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you.
So you got your choices too. Cook them in there and they'll puff up and add starch to the soup, or cook them separately, eliminate the starch if you can, or just rinse it off a little bit with warm or cool water, and then add them to the soup.
And how long will the soup stay in the refrigerator?
At least 2 or 3 days, and this can be frozen. You can freeze it in a good sealed well in a plastic or, a good plastic, or in a glass jar. If you're going to seal it in a jar, let me show you one. Okay. Let me show you 2. Okay, glass jars, glass containers. If you're going to put it in something like this that has the clip down top, make sure that you do not fill it to the top because it will expand. And when you put it in the freezer, leave the top open until you're sure that the soup has frozen, or any other liquid that you're putting in there, so that since it expands, it will come up. If you close it and it expands, you can crack the whole jar, which you don't want to do. So put it in open, just a little. And the same thing with if you're using a reusable jar like this, fill it to about 3/4 or a little more than that. Let it rise first and then put your top on it. Does that make sense?
Yes, there's nothing worse than a big mess in the freezer when something freezes.
That's like I've had friends who put a bottle of wine in the freezer and forget it.
That's a mess.
Yeah, well, it depends on if you like wine all over everything in your freezer. Yeah, that can happen. Okay, I think we're simmering here for about 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to put the cabbage in. Plunk. And get every little piece of the cabbage in there. And this has, well, let's switch over so you can see what I'm doing. Did Martha Stewart go through all this when she was cooking?
Well, I think she had some other challenges as well along the way. So.
Okay. You can see how thick this is in there.
Yes,
I'm
definitely.
going to mix it in. So this is actually more like chicken stew than chicken soup. And, oh gosh, does that smell good? Oh yeah. So anyway, we're just going to put the top back on. And I've got it on medium now. So it'll come back up to simmering, and let that simmer for about another 10 minutes. And that's all you need, and you've got your meal ready. You've got your chicken and cabbage soup, which is loaded with nutrition, because cabbage is one of the, I think it's in the brassica family. For some reason, I blanked on that for a second. But it's one of the best little vegetables that you can eat. Cabbage, Brussels sprouts, I call them baby cabbages. And it adds fiber. It adds, sometimes if your body is not accustomed to it, especially if it's raw, it will perhaps do a little digestive disturbance. But you're still getting the benefit of the minerals and the vitamins that are in it. And when you put something like this away, if you haven't got the green bags or something in which you can keep it tightly, it will stay for a week. If you store it properly in the bins in your refrigerator that are for vegetables and fruits. And go from vegetables to fruits or fruits to vegetables if you have an adjustment in the refrigerator. And make sure you've got it on the proper one. Of course, this makes wonderful salads. And this is only one way to cook it, and it imparts the flavor and all the goodies in it into the soup. So
Now, Ricki, does everything have to be organic?
not necessarily. I would definitely recommend organic if you're using something like spinach or if you're using strawberries and other vegetables. But your best bet is to buy the cleanest, freshest, in-season vegetables that you can find. Some of the things should be organic. I think so, especially if they come out of the earth, like onions or scallions or something that are grown in soil. And this time I'm using organic chicken because I prefer that. I think they're healthier, they're fed better, and they're not literally cooped up. They're allowed to run free range. If you get free range, without any antibiotics and without any other additives or preservatives other than good food, that's usable too. But go to Environmental Works Group. It's EWG.org. And they have a list of what they call the Dirty Dozen, which are the vegetables that are highly sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, which you don't want to eat. That includes spinach, apples, strawberries, and a number of others, fruits and vegetables. And they also have what they call the Clean 15. And those are the things that you can buy conventionally as well as organically. And that includes a lot of fruits and vegetables. But that's your good guide because they do an incredible job, a pretty good job of researching what vegetables and what fruits and how things are produced They also let you know what are good things for your skin, because that's the largest organ. And if you're using a skin cream that has all sorts of preservatives and chemicals that you can't pronounce, that doesn't do your body any good. So EWG is a good source for good information as far as what to get by organic, what sunscreens to get, as well as what foods and cleaning products as well. And you can clean things, by the way, with lemon and orange.
Yeah, I know. My sister has been a distributor for Young Living essential oils, and not a paid spokesperson, but I know they also have a line of cleaning solutions that are all natural.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Have, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's Young Living that uses clove in their cleaning products.
Thieves, I think. Yes, I think it's clove.
Thieves.
Thieves.
Actually, I have it.
Oh.
Yeah, and I love the smell of it as well. The cloves, there's just something very clean about that.
It reminds me of the holidays for some reason.
Yes, and one of the things that I've always thought about is in the spice routes, the ancient spice routes from India and from the Far East and through that gradually made their way across from Turkey and across into Europe. Those spice traders were healthier than most people because they ate foods and they worked with the spices, and even inhaling the aroma, as you do with aromatherapy, with some of those things like cloves and cinnamon, cardamom, and a number of different spices and herbs that are used from ancient times. They were healthier because they worked with the spices. Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating. I'll just share along the spice route that my brother-in-law made some really spicy chili. I mean, that you were crying, nose running. And it didn't affect me really as much as the rest of my family. I love all the spices. It gets your body going. It's like, you're awake, alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, it heats. It's giving you heat, and the heat spreads throughout your system. And the only problem with that is if you're going through perimenopause and you've got hot flashes, it can exacerbate. I know it, isn't it? But truly, spices and herbs are some of those best foods to keep you healthy. And if you can not replace just salt and pepper, but add to salt and pepper with some of the herbs as we did today, and the fresher the better. If you can't get fresh, get organically dried. The oregano, you can grow oregano. You can grow mint, which is fabulous. The sage grows beautifully. Rosemary is another one that will go through heat, cold, and whatever. All of these spices add to your body's defense mechanisms, so they can help boost your immune system. And that's one of the reasons that I do what I do with food.
Ricki, what are your thoughts on the various types of salt?
Well, here's where Richard, who is a geophysicist, and I kind of differ, shall I say. I've had salts that are everything from white, literally, to black. I know you've seen sea salt versus kosher salt versus, iodized salt. Salt naturally will have iodine in it. If it comes from the earth, it's full of minerals, and it's a good seasoning. For centuries, people used salt for preserving. So not that you want to use it to preserve your body, but your body's made up of about 75% salt water. And so when I work with clients privately and they talk about, not eating salt because their doctor said, blah, 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 that's fine. I'm glad that your doctor said that, but does your doctor realize you're 75% salt water? And if you're not getting the salt into your system, then you can deplete that, and that's an electrolyte. And electrolytes help you with energy. They're there for a purpose. And everything in your body, God didn't make any mistakes as far as I'm concerned. And so using things like salt, and you can get kosher salt, you can get the sea salts, I said, in any different colors. The different colors are according to, I believe, the mineral contents of the salts and where they come from. literally from which area of the world and which area of the ocean that they're from. So you can have a good time with salts. My son, who's an incredible cook, as well as my daughter, they have salts. I've got my little old kosher salt in this. And he has a couple of these vessels, but he's got different bottles with pink salt and orange salt and black salt. And so he chooses what to use according to the actual flavors that the salts will impart. So does that help?
It sure does. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you.
You can have fun with the salts.
I like what you shared about the body and being made mostly up of water and salt. And you can certainly tell when your electrolytes are off.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, what happens to runners? This is why they have runners eating and drinking along the way when they're doing a marathon. Or if you've ever done a marathon, or even just doing something where you're exerting yourself and you're sweating. If you're perspiring, you're losing that salt water. And so you've got to replace the electrolytes that you're losing with salt and a number of other things like potassium and, calcium too, but that's a little different. But there's a lot of different things. Let me see what's in that bone broth, just for fun. Okay, by the way, there are new labels now. The FDA has required the contents of potassium as well as iron and vitamin D to be listed on labels. So make sure that your labels are contemporary, which means it's a newer product. And you look for those because the carbohydrates and the sodium and cholesterol have been on there for years. But the addition of vitamin D, iron, and potassium have to be on there. And then for example, for my kidney clients, potassium, I look for low potassium foods and low potassium broths. That's where making your own broth will help you comply with some of the regulations for, let's say, for people with kidney problems. This one has a bunch. It's got 10%, it's got 480 milligrams in 1 cup. So there are 4 cups in here. So I put 3 cups in the soup, which will give it about almost 1,400 milligrams of potassium. So be careful when you're cooking if you have special needs, if someone you know has special needs or you do. And look for your requirements on here. There's no vitamin D in any of this, nor is there calcium, which is interesting because there's no bones in the soup. If there were bones, you'd have the calcium as well as maybe some iron. So those are the new requirements.
Now, when you start to boil down liquid, does that have an impact on the minerals and salt content that's left?
It can, but usually not the salt. The salt will not boil out. If you're using something like a wine or alcohol, something, or a vinegar or something like that, some of that will boil out. The alcohol will boil out because it will if you're reaching 212 boiling Fahrenheit, then you're going to boil out some of the things. But for the most part, if you're using a cover, you're going to keep most of your things in there because it drips back in. And that's another thing, by the way. You just reminded me of something. How many people use a microwave and they put plastic over the microwaving food?
I was doing this for years until my nephew told me how dangerous it was.
Yes, because whenever you heat plastic, even if it's a good plastic, and I don't know if some of the containers, I rarely cover anything in the microwave. If I do, I'll use a dish, an inverted dish or a top that's ceramic, a plate or something. Because whatever you put on there, especially if the food has liquid, is going to drip back into it, which means it's going to leach from the plastic into your food. And that's phthalates and nasty things. So yes, good question. So if you're going to microwave something and you have to cover it, invert a dish or use a plate or something that's not plastic.
Yeah, that's what I just started doing that a couple months ago.
Yeah, it'll make a difference because unfortunately things like phthalates are ubiquitous. They're all over the place. Let's see if we can see what's going on in the pot. I believe we're just about ready to serve. Oh, that looks good.
You are fast getting over there, Ricki.
Was that okay?
Yeah, that was great.
All right, I think we're done. Look at that. This is a chunky, wonderful soup. And
Beautiful.
I'm going to put a little of that in a bowl just so you can see how pretty it looks. And actually, I'm going to turn it off. And you can see that the cabbage has melted. I'm just going to take one big scoop so you can see what's in here. Can everybody see that?
Yes, it looks stunning.
It's pretty. And it's steaming beautifully. Yes. Now, of course, if you need to, you can always correct the spices at this point. So I'll give it a little taste. Let me see how this works. Why do I have that up there? There's something in it.
Wow, we lost Ricki. No. Oh my gosh. Well, she dropped off. Hopefully she'll come back. We did see the finished product, which looked amazing. So I want to thank everybody. You can get the recipe. We will be posting it on all of the platforms. If you're not aware, our new website is up and running since our official launch of USA Global TV. You can go over to, guess where? usaglobaltv.com, and you can actually book your session to be a guest on our show. If you're interested in being a sponsor, or if you want to watch any of our shows, you can watch all of our playlists there. Every show has its own playlist, and you're welcome to drop in anytime you want. A message I want to leave with our viewers and our audience listening on Business Talk Radio. Starting tomorrow, I am offering amazing fitness classes every Saturday at 11 a.m. So in alignment with eating healthy, we are going to do meditation, yoga, light weights, and some cardio. I am a certified yoga sculpt teacher by Core Power Yoga, and I'm also a certified meditation teacher by The Path. So if you're interested, I'm going to put up the little promo that I have here. And it's Dr. J's fitness classes. And I'll also put up the banner so you can actually go over and join me. Just go to my website. So actually I have two websites, usaglobaltv.com and drjacalyn.com, which is where you can work with me for my life and executive coaching, as well as the listening mentor, where I teach you how to actually listen. And you can become an elevated listener and be on our TV show, The Listening Mentor. And now we are adding fitness classes. I've been teaching fitness for probably 20 years. So I hope you'll join us tomorrow at 11 a.m., which is Eastern time, or 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here today and for joining us on the United Kitchens. We really appreciate it. We'll be back with Ricki next week. And right after this, we have the Listening Mentor, followed by Loving Longevity. And then we close out our day and our broadcasting week with Pet Psychic Amina. And we have a special guest who's going to speak with us about pets of the homeless, something that we don't really think of that much, pets of the homeless, and how we can help them. All right, take care. Thanks again for watching. We appreciate you. Bye.